The autumn sun lit the Norwegian sky with a cold silvery light. In a remote coastal region, Dr. Ingrid Svensson led a team of archaeologists on a promising dig. Recent climate change had exposed a Viking burial mound that had been buried under the ice for centuries. Over the course of weeks, the archaeologists had uncovered fragments of weapons, bones, weathered shields, and a partially preserved burial boat. But it was on the last day of the expedition that something extraordinary happened. In a hidden corner of the burial chamber, behind carefully stacked stones, a small wooden chest was discovered. It was decorated with carvings of serpents and ravens, symbols often associated with Odin, the god of wisdom and war. Feeling a mixture of anxiety and excitement, Ingrid carefully opened the chest. Inside, a golden necklace rested on a nearly decomposed cloth. The pendant on the necklace was a raven carved in gold, its eyes made of small, shiny black stones that seemed to watch whoever looked at it. Ancient runes were etched along the pendant's arc. Ingrid couldn't place them all at once, but one word caught her eye: Domr, which she knew meant judgment. "This is incredible," Ingrid said quietly, holding the necklace in her trembling hands. The team around her gathered in awe as she examined the artifact more closely. This necklace could have belonged to an important leader, perhaps a jarl or even a priest of Odin. But the moment Ingrid touched the necklace, a chill ran through her body. The temperature around her, already low, seemed to drop even further. The wind outside the cave picked up, whistling like a distant voice. Ingrid looked at the artifact again, feeling something she couldn't explain, as if the necklace were watching her back. That night, the expedition's camp fell into an uncomfortable silence. The usually lively group was restless. Some complained of a sudden malaise. Others said they felt as if they were being watched. As darkness fell, the winds that blew across the tundra began to carry strange sounds. They were like whispers, incomprehensible, words coming from every direction. In the middle of the night, Ingrid woke with a start. A metallic clang echoed through the camp's main tent, where the recovered artifacts were stored. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped out hesitantly, braving the icy wind that seemed to cut her to the bone. When she entered the tent, she found the necklace on the floor out of its box. She knew she had put it away before going to sleep. "It must have been the wind," she murmured, trying to calm herself, even though she knew the explanation made no sense. When she bent down to pick up the necklace, she felt that chill again. When she looked up, she saw something that made her freeze: the shadow of a large crow cast on the tent wall, even though there was nothing there to create that silhouette. Suddenly, a low, guttural voice seemed to fill the space, speaking in a language she did not fully understand. Only one word was clear: Domr. The sound faded as quickly as it had begun, and the raven's shadow was gone. Ingrid stood there, panting, clutching the necklace tightly. The next day, she shared some of her concerns with Lars, her most trusted assistant. He suggested that perhaps they were tired, or that the isolation was getting to them. But Ingrid knew something was wrong. The necklace was not just a historical object, it carried an energy that seemed to pulse alive. As the expedition wound down its activities and prepared the items for transport to Oslo, Ingrid could not get the word trial out of her mind. Something about the necklace troubled her deeply. Little did she know that the real trial was just beginning. Back in Oslo, the golden necklace became the centerpiece of a new exhibition at the National Museum of Norway. The discovery was hailed by scholars and the media as a milestone in Nordic archaeology. For Dr. Ingrid Svensson, however, the sense of unease she had felt in the tomb only grew stronger. While the necklace was locked in a reinforced glass display case, Ingrid spent hours studying the runes engraved on the pendant. Combining historical knowledge and ancient translations, she began to understand more about the artifact's significance. The inscriptions described the necklace as a sacred bond between worlds, dedicated to Odin and the Draugr, the undead who protected desecrated treasures. One phrase in particular caught her attention: "He who breaks the seal will awaken the eyes of Odin, and Domr will fall upon all mortals." That same night, as Ingrid worked alone in the museum's laboratory, something disturbing happened. One of the security cameras Over the next few days, strange phenomena began to occur at the museum. Visitors reported hearing whispers in strange languages as they approached the necklace's display case. Others reported feeling a weight on their chest or a sense of being watched. One of the museum's employees walking through the empty hall after hours saw birds, ravens he swore, flying around inside the building even though the windows were all closed. For Ingrid, these events were only the beginning. She began to have recurring nightmares, visions of bloody battles and dead men walking among the living. At the center of these visions was always a giant raven with glowing eyes, staring at her, as if judging her soul. Determined to learn more about the necklace, Ingrid contacted an expert on Norse runes, Professor Bjorn Alvik. When she showed the inscriptions to his colleague, he was alarmed. "This is not just a funerary artifact, Ingrid," he said, looking at her seriously. "These runes are a warning. You have found something that should have remained buried." Bjorn explained that the term dommer referred not only to judgment, but to a divine decree, something irrevocable. He also suggested that the necklace could be a symbol of protection, meant to keep ancient forces in balance. By removing it from the tomb, Ingrid and her team might have disturbed something. They did not understand. That same night, a storm began to gather over Oslo. Strong winds blew and thunder echoed through the streets. Ingrid stayed in the museum until late, lost in thought as she reread the inscriptions. When she finally decided to go home, she found the museum shrouded in unusual darkness. The emergency lights flickered, and the silence was oppressive. As she walked down the main hallway, the sound of breaking glass echoed in the room where the necklace was displayed. Ingrid ran over, her heart pounding. When she entered, she found the display case with the necklace shattered. The artifact lay on the floor, but what caught her attention was the presence of wet footprints around it, large and misshapen, as if they were not human. Ingrid hesitated before picking up the necklace, feeling the weight of the object throb in her hands like a beating heart. When she looked up, she saw a shadowy figure in the doorway. It was a tall man dressed in Viking armor. His skin looked dead and grey, and his eyes glowed with a yellowish light. "Dommer," he whispered, before disappearing like smoke. Terrified, Ingrid realized that the necklace had awakened something that could not be easily contained. As the storm raged outside, she knew that the true battle between the living and the dead was about to begin. The following night was marked by events that would send Oslo into panic. The storm that had begun the night before did not abate, and bizarre reports began to emerge from all over the city. People claimed to have seen shadowy figures walking the streets in the early hours of the morning, always followed by the sound of beating wings and incomprehensible whispers. Meanwhile, Ingrid couldn't sleep. The necklace was now hidden in her home, but she could feel its weight almost physically, as if it were pulling her somewhere. She spent hours trying to translate more runes on the pendant, but whenever she focused on them, she heard voices all around her, muttering words in an old Norse she barely understood. Desperate for answers, Ingrid called Professor Bjorn Alvik. When he answered, his voice was strained. "Ingrid, you need to return this artifact to the tomb as soon as possible." "It's not that simple, Bjorn," she replied. "We're not allowed to go back there right now, and I'm not sure that will be enough. There's something alive in this necklace, something that wants to be freed." Bjorn was silent for a few seconds before answering. "This is worse than I thought. Ingrid, listen carefully. This necklace is not just a symbol, it's a key. It connects this world to the world of the dead. By taking it from the tomb, you've broken a seal. Now the Draugr are awakening." Ingrid was shocked. The Draugr, according to legend, were the dead who guarded desecrated treasures and who could rise from their graves to exact revenge. She had never believed that such stories were more than myth, but now the evidence was before her eyes. "What do I do, Bjorn?" Ingrid asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must perform a ritual to seal the necklace again, but it will be dangerous and you cannot do it alone." Bjorn explained that the ritual required invoking Odin, the god who had originally sealed the necklace. It would require holy symbols, a circle of protection and a sacrifice. Ingrid hesitated, but she knew she had no choice. Meanwhile, the city was descending into chaos. Bodies began to disappear from local cemeteries, and authorities were at a loss to explain the phenomenon. Worse still, residents reported attacks by shadowy, deformed figures who appeared at night and left a trail of destruction in their wake. Ingrid watched the news on TV with a knot in her stomach. This was her fault. Determined, she met Bjorn at the museum that same night. He brought the materials needed for the ritual: candles, a book of runes, and a hammer that represented Mjolnir, Thor's symbol used for protection. They began to prepare the circle of protection in the basement of the museum, away from prying eyes. When everything was ready, Ingrid placed the necklace in the center of the circle and began to chant the words that Bjorn had taught her. At first, everything seemed calm, but then the candles began to flicker violently. The wind seemed to blow inside the room, carrying whispers that grew louder by the second. Suddenly the lights went out and a heavy presence filled the room. Bjorn tried to continue the ritual, but was interrupted by a guttural sound coming from the darkness. When the candles relit, the figure of a dead man in Viking armor and glowing yellow eyes stood within the circle, holding the necklace. "You have no right to seal what has been broken," he said, his voice reverberating like thunder. "The judgment has already begun." Before Ingrid or Bjorn could react, more figures appeared around them, all undead who had awakened. They were Draugr, and their bodies were in advanced states of decay, but their presence was overwhelming. Ingrid, trembling, cried out, "Why have you come? What do you want from us?" The Draugr leader pointed at her. "You have freed the key. Now the door will be opened, and the living will pay for their sins." The hall shook, and Bjorn, in despair, shouted for Ingrid to continue the ritual. She began to recite the words again, but the Draugr rushed into the circle, breaking the protective symbol. One of them attacked Bjorn, who fell, screaming in pain. Ingrid was left alone, surrounded by the slowly approaching dead. The necklace, in its golden glow, seemed to pulse as if it had a life of its own. She knew in that moment that there was no way to undo what had begun. As the Draugr surrounded her, the last thing Ingrid heard was the word "Domr," whispered on the wind, before everything went dark. Story. When Ingrid awoke, everything was shrouded in a blue twilight. The ground beneath her feet was as cold as stone, and the air smelled acrid of damp earth and death. Looking around, she realized that she was no longer in the basement of the museum, but in a desolate and bleak landscape. Black mountains surrounded a field covered in thick fog, and the distant sound of ravens echoed like omens of doom. In the center of the field, she saw the necklace. It floated in the air, radiating a golden light, but its glow seemed more menacing than beautiful. Around it, shadowy figures, the Draugr, knelt, as if performing some kind of ritual. Ingrid realized that this was not just a place, it was a kind of limbo between the worlds of the living and the dead. A deep voice cut through the silence. "You dared to break the seal, mortal. Now you must face the consequences." Ingrid turned and saw the imposing figure of Odin. His eyes glowed like blue flames, and he carried a spear that seemed to contain the weight of entire ages. His presence was overwhelming, making Ingrid feel tiny and insignificant. "I didn't mean to," she tried to explain, but Odin cut her off with a stern gesture. "Ignorance is no excuse. You have awakened what should have remained dormant. Now the balance has been broken." Before Ingrid could respond, the earth beneath her feet shook, and fissures began to open, releasing red fire. More Draugr emerged, from the holes, their eyes glowing with an ancient rage. The necklace seemed to be drawing them in, pulsing as if it had a life of its own. Ingrid realized that this was not just an artifact. It was an anchor, a portal that connected the worlds. If it was not destroyed, the Draugr would invade the world of the living, bringing chaos and destruction. Desperate, Ingrid cried out to Odin, "You are the god of wisdom and war. Tell me what to do." Odin stared at her for a moment before answering. "The necklace can only be destroyed by sacrifice. A living soul must offer to bear the weight of the curse and seal the portal." Ingrid felt the weight of the words. She looked at the necklace, then at the approaching Draugr. He was dead, and there was no one left to help her. If she did nothing, the whole world would pay the price. With determination, Ingrid walked toward the necklace, ignoring the whispers that seemed to beg her to stop. When she reached for it, she felt a searing pain run through her body, as if 1,000 blades were cutting into her skin. But she did not let go. Holding the necklace, she began to chant the ritual Bjorn had taught her. The runes on the necklace began to glow brightly, and the Draugr screamed in agony, as if they were being pulled back into the depths. Odin watched silently, his expression grave. "You carry courage, mortal, but courage will not save you." Ingrid knew what he meant. The ritual would require her life, and she accepted that. Closing her eyes, she focused on the final words of the incantation. Feeling her energy drain into the necklace, an intense flash enveloped everything around her. Ingrid felt her body disappear, as if it were disintegrating. When she opened her eyes again, she stood on a vast battlefield, surrounded by fallen warriors. On the horizon, Valhalla shone like a golden mirage. She knew then that her sacrifice had not been in vain. In the real world, the necklace had disappeared, and the Draugr had returned to their eternal rest. The museum was found in ruins, and the story of Ingrid and the necklace became a modern legend, told as a warning to those who would dare challenge the secrets of the gods and the mysteries of the dead. But some say that on stormy nights, her voice can be heard in the wind whispering, "Do not awaken what you cannot control."